He paid for strangers' groceries. 1 month later, she returned with the deed to a house. It was a slow Tuesday evening in a tired part of town. The sun hung low over the skyline, casting long orange shadows on crumbling sidewalks and tired storefronts. The local grocery store flickered its fluorescent lights above aisles of budget goods and dented cans, its checkout lines as weary as the people standing in them. Jamal wiped his hands on a rag as he stepped through the automatic doors, the hum of the compressors behind him fading into the background. He had just finished patching up a broken AC unit in a nearby diner, a job that paid enough to keep the lights on and maybe cover a little of his mother's medication this month. Nothing more. He didn't come here for much, just a loaf of bread, some eggs, maybe a few instant noodles if they were on sale. That was how life went these days. Tight, quiet, careful. But just as he rounded the final aisle toward the checkout, he noticed something. A pause in the flow of movement, a kind of silence wrapped in discomfort. At the front, a woman stood frozen, digging through a worn leather purse with trembling hands. She was white, maybe in her 70s, her clothes modest but clean. Her silver-gray hair was tucked behind her ears, and her face was lined not just with age, but with effort. The cashier, a teenager chewing gum with the practiced apathy of someone counting down the minutes until closing time, tapped the register. Screen impatiently. "Ma'am, I've already scanned everything. Total's $96.82. I thought I had enough," she whispered, pulling out a few crumpled bills and some loose change. She laid them on the counter slowly, one by one, fingers shaking. "Can I just take the eggs and the milk?" The boy behind the register shrugged. "You can take whatever you can pay for." Someone in line snorted, and another muttered under their breath, "People always hold up the line for stuff they can't afford." Typical. Jamal watched all of this unfold. He could feel it, the eyes shifting toward him as he stepped closer. He'd felt those same eyes when he was 13, followed around stores like a thief. Felt them at 16, when he'd been stopped and searched on the way home from school. He knew the weight of them, and he knew they expected him to stay where he was, to say nothing, do nothing. But Jamal had grown tired of silence. He walked past the carts, past the people whispering judgments behind polite smiles. He stepped next to the woman and placed a folded 20 on the counter. Then another. Then one more. The cashier raised an eyebrow. "That should cover the rest," Jamal said simply. "Go ahead and ring it all up." The woman blinked at him, startled. "Oh no, I couldn't possibly let you—" "It's all right," he said gently, offering her a small smile. "Please, just take your groceries." The store was suddenly very quiet. Even the usual beeping of the scanner seemed to have taken a break. A few customers looked away, uncomfortable, as if kindness was somehow embarrassing. The cashier muttered a quick thanks and handed over the receipt. The old woman turned to Jamal, tears brimming in her faded blue eyes. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "I didn't think anyone would— Thank you. Thank you, young man." Jamal nodded. "You don't have to say anything." She reached out, gently touched his arm. "What's your name?" "Jamal." That was all. He didn't give a last name, didn't want anything more. He picked up his loaf of bread and his eggs, turned, and walked away before anyone else could say a word. He didn't see the way the woman stood there for a moment longer, holding the bag to her chest like something sacred. He didn't see the quiet wonder in her eyes. And he didn't know, not yet, how far one small act of kindness could ripple. Because for Jamal, it was just another day, just another quiet choice to do what was right. Even when the world wasn't watching, especially then. The next morning came with the same gray drizzle that had soaked the neighborhood all week. The weather matched the buildings, peeling paint, water-stained bricks, chain-link fences that held more rust than strength. Jamal lived on the second floor of a rented duplex, the kind with thin walls and a front door that swelled when it rained. The plumbing groaned like it resented being woken up, and the heater sounded like an old man coughing. His alarm had gone off at 6:30. By 7, he'd helped his mother take her medication, prepared her some toast and weak coffee, and made sure the remote was close at hand. She moved slowly these days, arthritis, diabetes, and a stubborn independence that refused help unless absolutely necessary. Her eyes followed him to the door, and even though she didn't say anything, he could feel her worry pressing through the silence. "You need anything, Ma, just call the neighbor, all right?" he said, shrugging into his work jacket. She nodded, then said softly, "Don't forget to eat lunch this time." Jamal smiled. No promises. Outside, his old truck coughed twice before the engine caught. It had over 180,000 miles on it, and a habit of stalling when he took sharp corners. But it was his, and that meant something. At the job site, a commercial plumbing project 2 towns over, the morning dragged with its usual weight. Lugging tools, fixing cracked pipes in tight crawl spaces, answering too many questions from foremen who never really looked him in the eye. His coworkers joked about football, women, and taxes. Sometimes they joked about people like Jamal too, just not always. When he was in earshot, sometimes they forgot he was there, but today, something was off. When he climbed into the company truck with 2 others for a supply run, one of them, a redhead named Greg, turned around from the passenger seat. "Hey," Greg said, biting, into a granola bar. "You were at Marty's Mart the other night, right?" Jamal kept his eyes on the road. "Yeah. Why?" "Heard you paid for some old lady's groceries. Real sweet of you." The tone wasn't sincere. "Just trying to help," Jamal said flatly. The guy in the back, Dave, chuckled. "Man, if I did that, I'd get called a creep. Bet she thought you were flirting or something." Greg laughed. "Yeah, or maybe she'll leave you something in her will, huh? You never know with these lonely old ladies." Jamal didn't respond. He just gripped the steering wheel tighter. These weren't new jokes. They never were. "Relax, bro," Dave added after a beat. "Just messing with you. Don't be so uptight." It wasn't until the truck came to a stop at the hardware yard that Jamal let out a slow breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Later that afternoon, during break, he checked his phone. No calls, no messages. Just a few spam emails and a photo reminder from his cousin about a family gathering he wouldn't be able to afford the gas for. He leaned against the back wall of the building, sipping water, and let his eyes wander to the traffic outside the chain-link fence. For a moment, everything blurred, the cars, the people, the colors. Just noise. A memory rose without warning, blue and red lights behind him. He had been 23, driving back from a late shift. He hadn't been speeding, seatbelt on, no loud music. Still, they pulled him over. The officer had asked for license and registration, then circled the truck twice like a wolf sniffing prey. Jamal remembered his own voice sounding calm, too calm, like he was trying not to wake a sleeping threat. The questions came sharp and loaded. "Where are you coming from? Where are you headed? Do you have anything illegal in the, vehicle?" Then the request. "Step out of the car, please." They searched him, patted him down, looked under the seats, emptied his backpack. All for a broken taillight that wasn't actually broken. And when it was over, the officer gave him a final glance, cold and unblinking. "You fit the description," he said. That was it. No apology, no paperwork. Just the weight of implication. Back. In the present, Jamal blinked, the memory dissolving as the construction site resumed its noise. Hammers, drills, voices shouting measurements. He tossed his water bottle into the bin and got back to work, carrying heavy things for light pay. That evening, as he walked up the steps to his apartment, he passed his neighbor, Mr. Gentry, et al., white man in his 60s who always found something to complain about. "You know," Mr. Gentry called from his porch, "folks are talking. Heard what you did for that lady." Jamal turned, weary. "Is that right?" "Sure is. Strange kind of charity. Some of us wonder if there's more to the story." Jamal didn't answer, just gave a tired smile, one that said, "I've heard it all before." Inside, the apartment smelled of boiled greens and detergent. His mother sat in her chair, the TV flickering images of a game show. She looked up, her face softening. "You all right, baby?" "Yeah," he said, sitting beside her. "Just tired." She patted his hand. "You're doing good, Jamal. Don't let nobody tell you different." He nodded, but her words clung to the edge of his heart like raindrops on a window. He wanted to believe them. Needed to. But the world had a way of twisting goodness into suspicion, of making a gift look like a grift, especially when the hand offering it was dark-skinned. Still, he held on to one simple thing. That woman's eyes at the store. That quiet moment when kindness didn't need to be explained. When it was enough to just be human. He didn't do it for recognition or approval. He did it because he knew what it felt like to be left behind, to come up short, to be invisible. So he would keep showing up, even if the world misunderstood. Even if it never clapped for him, because goodness, he believed, didn't need an audience. It just needed someone willing to carry it forward, and that, he thought, was still worth doing. The day had started like any other, grimy, hot, and bone-tired. Jamal was halfway through fixing a broken radiator on the 3rd floor of an old building, when his phone buzzed. He ignored it at first. Calls during work hours usually meant something urgent or something expensive, and he could afford neither. But when the buzzing came again, then a knock on the front office door downstairs followed by a voice calling his name. Something told him this wasn't just a missed call from his mom or a reminder about overdue bills. He wiped sweat from his brow and made his way down the creaky stairs, the smell of rust and mold lingering like it always did in these old complexes. The landlord's office stood open, and through the dusty glass door, he saw her. She looked out of place. Margaret Whitmore stood with her hands clasped in front of her, holding a leather-bound folder. Her silver hair was brushed neatly, and though she wore the same simple style as before, a cardigan, long skirt, orthopedic shoes, there was something unmistakably calm and composed about her. She stood like someone who had lived many years with grace, and now moved forward with purpose. It took a moment for Jamal to recognize her. A month had passed since the grocery store. In his mind, that night had faded into a kind of quiet memory, something filed under good deeds, small victories. But here she was, real, solid, and standing in front of him again. "Mrs. Whitmore?" he asked, surprised. She smiled gently. "It's Margaret, please." He blinked. "What are you? How did you?" I asked the store manager, she said before he could finish. "Told him I was trying to find the young man who helped me. He didn't know your last name, but he remembered you worked maintenance somewhere nearby. I followed the pieces until I ended up here." Jamal glanced toward his boss's office, but no one was paying attention. He stepped outside with her. The sunlight hit hard, and he squinted. Margaret handed him the folder. "I'd like you to have this." He took it cautiously. The folder was heavier than it looked. "What is it?" he asked. "Please," she said. "Sit down. This isn't something to rush." They sat on the concrete steps in front of the building, a strange pairing. To anyone walking by, an old white woman in pearls and a young black man in a work shirt with grease on his collar. Jamal opened the folder. Legal documents, deed transfers, notarized signatures, property lines. Jamal stared at the heading at the top of the page, Certificate of Property Ownership, 132 Maple Lane, Montgomery County. He didn't speak. Couldn't. His throat dried instantly. Margaret's voice was steady. "It's not a palace, but it's clean, solid. 2 bedrooms, a small yard. It's yours now. All of it. No tricks, no rent, just a key, and your name on the deed." He looked up at her, blinking like he was trying to see through a dream. "Why?" he whispered. "Why would you do this?" She took a deep breath. Her gaze softened, but her hands gripped each other tightly in her lap, as though steadying herself. "My husband's name was Robert," she said. "He was in commercial real estate, bought small properties all over town. We had a good life, comfortable, not flashy but full of love. Then came COVID. First our son, gone in a week, then Robert, 2 months later. Just like that, Jamal." Said nothing, afraid to interrupt. Her voice quivered just once, but she kept going. "I have no family left, no siblings, no nieces or nephews close. Just the quiet now. For a long time I felt like I was just waiting to join them. Until you stepped in front of me at that grocery store." She smiled faintly. "You didn't know who I was. You didn't expect anything. That mattered to me. It reminded me of who Robert used to be. He helped people. Saw them. We both did once. But we drifted. Became comfortable with comfort." She looked at him now, her eyes sharp with clarity. "That day you reminded me that goodness doesn't ask for attention. It just is. I realized I was still here for a reason. I didn't want to waste what little I had left." Jamal shook his head slowly, struggling to form words. "But a house? I don't know what to say. I can't repay this." "You already did," she said gently. "You reminded me how to live again. I just wanted to give you something solid. Something that says, the world may be cruel, but it doesn't." "Get the final say." He stared down at the folder again. It still didn't feel real. How could it? All his life he'd worked just to stay afloat. He'd never imagined owning anything more permanent than his truck. Margaret placed a small key in his hand. "It needs a bit of fixing up," she said with a faint smile. "But I think you're the kind of man who knows how to make broken things whole." Jamal finally looked her in the eye. "I don't know how to thank you." "You already did," she repeated. For a long moment, they just sat in silence. Two, strangers bound by a moment in time that had reshaped both their lives. Eventually, Margaret stood. "I won't bother you again," she said. "But if you ever want to have tea, or just sit in the garden, I'd be happy to have you." She turned and walked slowly down the steps, each movement measured and dignified. Jamal sat there long after she was gone, the folder still open on his lap, the key cool in his hand. Everything he thought he understood about the way the world worked, how kindness was ignored, how justice was rare, how hope was a fragile thing, shifted slightly, like a door creaking open to a room he never knew existed. And for the first time in a long while, Jamal didn't feel like he was just surviving. He felt like maybe, just maybe, he had a future. The house at 132 Maple Lane stood quiet under a pale blue sky, framed by tall sycamores and the faint scent of lilacs in bloom. Jamal approached slowly, still unsure if he was dreaming. The key Margaret had given him slid smoothly into the lock. The door creaked open with the sound of long-forgotten welcome. The place was modest, but beautiful in its own quiet way. Hardwood floors, worn with years of footsteps. A fireplace with photos above it. Black and white, faded but warm. There were bookshelves filled with old hardcovers and a rocking chair in the corner that looked like it had heard thousands of stories. Margaret was waiting inside, already seated with 2 cups of tea on the table between them. "I hope you like Earl." "Gray," she said. "It's not fancy, but it's honest." Jamal smiled. "It's perfect." He took a seat and looked around the room, soaking in the peaceful silence. No sirens, no loud neighbors, just birds chirping outside and the smell of home. "You decorated all this?" he asked. "Oh no," she chuckled. "Most of it is Robert's touch. He believed a home should speak before anyone opens their mouth." That it should tell a story, Jamal nodded. Feels like it does. They sat for a moment, drinking quietly. Then Margaret leaned forward and opened a small photo album resting on the table. I want to show you something. She turned a few pages, then stopped on a photograph of a younger man. Tall, white, clean-shaven, wearing a suit, standing next to a sign that read, Memphis, 1968. That's Robert, she said softly. He was only 20 then, naive, restless, determined to do something right in a world that felt so wrong. Jamal glanced at her, curiosity rising. He was in Memphis during the sanitation workers' strike, she continued. He wasn't supposed to be there, skipped college classes, told his parents he was going on a road trip, but he was following the civil rights movement. He wanted to stand for something, be a part of it. She paused, then touched the corner of the photo with her fingers, as if it could bring the past a little closer. He ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time. There was a confrontation, small protest that turned ugly when white supremacists showed up. Chaos, people screaming. Then someone pulled a gun. Jamal leaned in. He would have died, she said. The man pointed the gun right at him, but out of nowhere, a black man tackled Robert to the ground and took the bullet himself. Jamal froze. Margaret's voice became quieter, her eyes distant. His name was Elijah. I only met him once. He survived, but barely. Robert visited him every week while he was in the hospital. They became close, closer than brothers in a way. But life moved on. Elijah moved up north. They kept in touch for a while. Then the letters stopped. You know how time is. It steals people. She looked up at Jamal now, her eyes sharper. But when I saw you that day in the grocery store, I swear to you, I saw Elijah again. Not his face, but the same look in your eyes. The same courage. The same refusal to let cruelty define the day. Jamal looked down at his tea. His hands trembled slightly. I didn't do anything special, he said quietly. It was $60. It's never just $60, Margaret replied. It's dignity. It's standing up when it's easier to walk away. It's saying, I see you, when the world is trained not to. She closed the photo album, gently. I've lived a long time, Jamal. Seen the world make promises it doesn't keep. Watched people march and fight and still end up in pain. But I've also seen sparks. Sparks that say maybe, just maybe, we haven't failed completely. Jamal swallowed hard. He wanted to say something, anything, but his throat closed up. I don't have children, Margaret said softly. Robert and I tried, but, well, life. She looked around the room as if it too was listening. So I've decided that this house, these memories, the little I have left, should go to someone who reminds me of the world Robert and Elijah believed in. Someone who lives like they did. He finally met her gaze. I don't know if I deserve all that. You don't have to deserve it, she said. You just have to live it. The words hung in the air like scripture. They spent the rest of the afternoon walking through the house. Margaret showed him the garden, where roses still struggled up through overgrown weeds. The attic, filled with books and old protest signs. Dignity for all, end Jim Crow, silence is violence. In the guest room, she pointed to a typewriter. Robert used to write op-eds in the local paper. They never printed most of them. Said he was too radical for a white businessman. She laughed softly. But he kept writing anyway, Jamal took it all in. He began to realize something that made his chest ache. This wasn't just a house. It was history, a capsule of a forgotten battle, a relic of a time when people risked everything for justice. And now, it was his. Not because he asked, not because he planned it, but because someone believed in him, truly believed. When the sun began to set, Margaret handed him an old envelope. Inside, was a black and white photo of Robert and Elijah, arms over each other's shoulders, both smiling like the war hadn't touched them yet. "I thought you should have it," she said. Jamal nodded, his voice thick. "I'll take care of it. Of all of this." "I know you will." As he stepped onto the porch, the sky melting into hues of amber and lavender, Jamal turned to her. "Margaret, thank you. For everything. For believing in someone like me." She smiled gently. "No, Jamal, thank you. For proving I was right to believe." Then she closed the door behind him, and for the first time, Jamal walked away from something not because he had to, but because something better was beginning. Something that wasn't just about race or money or past pain. It was about legacy, and choosing to carry it forward. The morning Jamal moved into 132 Maple Lane, the sky was still gray with dew. A pickup truck rumbled down the quiet street, its bed loaded with cardboard boxes, old hand-me-down furniture, and a mattress tied with worn rope. Nothing fancy, just what he'd been able to gather from his old rental and a few friends. He parked awkwardly in the gravel driveway. The house looked smaller now than it did the first day, but also warmer, more real. The paint was peeling in, places, and the roof needed patching. But to Jamal, it might as well have been a mansion. He turned the key, stepped inside, and let out a breath. This was home. Over the next week, Jamal worked like a man possessed. He scrubbed the windows, patched the leaky sink, trimmed the garden, and repainted the front steps. He spent his evenings reading through Robert's old journals and listening to dusty records that still worked on the antique player in the corner. Aretha, Sam Cooke, Marvin Gaye, they all echoed through the walls, filling the house with soul again. But not everyone was as welcoming as the music. At first, the neighbors barely said a word. Curtains twitched when he walked by. A few cars slowed down when he stood in the yard, as if he were a stranger in a place he wasn't supposed to be. One afternoon, as he mowed the front lawn, an older white man walked past and muttered just loud enough. "Didn't think they'd sell to one of them." Jamal paused, sweat dripping down his brow, then simply turned back to the mower. Another day, a woman from down the block came to his porch holding a clipboard. "Just wanted to make sure you're aware of the HOA guidelines," she said, not meeting his eyes. "There's a certain standard to keep up around here." He thanked her, smiled politely, and went back to painting the porch railing. It would have been easy to get angry, to retreat. But Jamal had seen worse, been through worse. He didn't come here to prove anything. He came to live. And living for him meant working hard, saying good morning first and treating people better than they expected. Little by little, the air around him shifted. The boy next door, probably 10 years old, wandered over one Saturday while Jamal was planting tomatoes in the backyard. "You building a farm?" the boy asked. "Sort of," Jamal grinned. "You like tomatoes?" The boy nodded. "My grandma makes sauce." "Well, when these grow, you can have some." "Help me water 'em?" the boy beamed. "I'll get the hose." By the end of the week, 3 kids were helping him pull weeds and chase squirrels out of the garden. By the end of the month, the boy's grandmother had brought him a peach cobbler just to say thank you. And then, the video happened. It was a short clip, just 30 seconds, filmed on a phone by a neighbor who happened to be walking by, the day Margaret handed Jamal the envelope in front of his old rental. She had posted it with a simple caption. He paid for her groceries. A month later, she gave him a house. Humanity is still alive. It went viral in less than 48 hours. Comments poured in. Some skeptical, some emotional, but most just stunned by the simplicity of it all. News outlets picked it up. Bloggers wrote about it. People from across the country shared stories of kindness and racism, of unlikely friendships and changed hearts. Jamal received letters from strangers, some handwritten, some emailed, thanking him for reminding them that the world could be good. One day,
he received a call from the principal of a local middle school. "We saw the story online," she said.
"Would you be willing to come speak to our students, maybe about kindness, about how little things can matter?" He hesitated at first. He wasn't a public speaker. He wasn't even sure what to say. But when he arrived at the auditorium and saw dozens of kids, black, white, brown, shy, bold, laughing, curious, he realized it wasn't about being perfect. It was about being real. He stood on the stage in jeans and a button-up, holding a single photo. The one of Robert and Elijah, arms over each other's shoulders. "I didn't grow up thinking I'd ever live in a house like the one I do now," he began. "I didn't grow up thinking the world would give me anything. And a lot of times, it didn't." He paused, letting the silence fill the space. "But someone believed in me. And I chose to believe in others. I chose not to let bitterness decide who I am." He looked out at the crowd, locking eyes with a boy in the front row who looked a lot like him at 12, quiet, guarded, waiting to see if someone would let him down. "Don't let the world tell you you're too small to matter. You matter, not because of your skin, not because of your story, but because you choose how you treat others." They clapped when he finished. Some of the teachers cried. Afterward, students lined up to shake his hand, ask questions, take photos. He went home that day feeling something he hadn't in years. Hope. One evening, as the sun sank behind the treetops and the cicadas began their slow song, Jamal stood on his front porch. The house was clean now. The garden was growing. There were wind chimes on the porch and 2 chairs that rocked in rhythm with the breeze. Across the yard, the neighborhood kids played tag, their laughter ringing through the air. One of them waved at him, and he waved back. He leaned against the porch rail, exhaled deeply, and smiled. It wasn't just about the house. It was about healing. About choosing love in a world that often offered the opposite. It was about knowing that a single kind act, $60, a smile, a name offered without pride, could ripple out further than any of us could imagine. The world hadn't changed overnight, but on this porch, at this moment, it felt like it just might be starting to, and that was enough. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness can unlock a future you never imagined. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real stories that remind us of the power of compassion. Until next time, stay kind, stay human.